Resuming debate. Reprise au débat. The honourable member for Brandon Souris.
Mr. Speaker, every day across Canada, we know individuals that get behind the wheel of a car and make the dreadful decision of driving while impaired. I would be willing to suggest that there isn't a single member in this House that has not been either directly or indirectly impacted by an incident of impaired driving. I know the member from St. Leonard, St. Michel has been an advocate for ways to reduce impacted driving since his own daughter was severely injured in an accident involving an impaired driver, and I am so glad to be able to be here to see her here in the chamber with us today, in the gallery. I applaud the member for all that he has done to raise awareness and for introducing a private member's motion that will proclaim the third week of March each and every year to be designated National Impaired Driving Prevention Week. Far too often we hear in the news about another incident of fatality because the driver made the dreadful decision of either thinking that they were still capable of operating a vehicle or that they would not get caught. In preparing for this motion, it was heart-wrenching to read about what the member from St. Leonard, St. Michel went through as his daughter was recovering in the House and, of course, in his presentation here in the chamber this evening as well. If by passing this motion it saves one life, then it is worth setting this in stone a full week solely for the purpose of highlighting impaired driving. I understand that through the good work of schools, police departments, governments and organizations such as Mothers Against Drunk Driving, Drinking and Driving, that individuals are bombarded about the consequences of getting behind the wheel after one too many beers or being high either through prescription drugs or illegal substances. Police departments such as the one in the city of Brandon are constantly setting up check stops to look for those who think they can evade the law and put others at risk. Many may be surprised to know this, but impaired driving in rural areas is far more overrepresented than those living in large urban centres. The reason being that in places like Ottawa and Toronto, or even in smaller communities like Red Deer or North Bay, there are available means of public transportation. This statistic of having more incidences of impaired driving in rural Canada should lead to a larger discussion of how we can make sure that impaired drivers stay off the roads and highways. Technology and innovation such as Uber or Lyft could in fact bridge that gap of having available ways to get home. And another particular program that has worked quite successfully is Operation Red Nose. For years, the volunteers of this very worthwhile program have driven home thousands of people from Christmas or New Year's parties, while also raising funds for many worthwhile causes. Mr. Speaker, the worst thing about discussing the topic of driving while impaired is that there are still some out there in society who are more than willing to continue to do it, but yet do not think about others who may get hurt because of their terrible life decisions. Driving while impaired is one of the most selfish decisions that anybody can make. There are some serious concerns out there that Canadians are not getting the message. According to a recent study that despite years of public messaging about the dangers of drinking and driving, Canada rates worst among 19 wealthy countries for percentage of roadway deaths linked to alcohol impairment. Last year, the U.S. Centre for Disease Control did a study of various countries and found that while fewer people were dying from car crashes, the proportion of deaths linked to alcohol impairment was 34%, which is higher than any other country that they surveyed. Now, Mr. Speaker, I am also pleased that the member has put forward in his motion that drugs, fatigue and distraction would also be part of the Prevention Week. Psychoactive prescription drugs can also contribute to impaired driving. Not every prescription drug out there will have the same effect on one's body and mind. In many circumstances, it will impact the driver in varying degrees based on the length of time they have taken the prescription drug, or the dosage. And while alcohol and illegal substances are now at the forefront of any discussion involving impaired driving, we can never forget that more Canadians take prescription drugs than ever before in our history. While there are particular stories involving prescription drugs that have made the news, such as the recent incident involving a famous golfer, it is imperative for all of us to shine a light on the inadequate amount of information available to everyday Canadians about the consequences involving prescription drugs and its impact on one's motor skills. We also know there are countless incidences of people being under the influence of drugs such as marijuana, cocaine, ecstasy, and crystal meth, which impacts their body and brain just as bad, if not worse, than alcohol. According to the Canadian Centre on Substance Abuse and Addiction, the percentage of Canadian drivers fatally injured in vehicle crashes and testing positive for drugs now exceeds that of drivers testing positive for alcohol. As parliamentarians, we must be fully seized with the unintended consequences of legalizing recreational marijuana. I have spoken in great length in my trepidations of rushing the July 1st, 2018 deadline. While I'm fully supportive of this private member's motion, I wonder if we should, at this moment in time, heed the advice from police chiefs to mayors and provincial governments who all say they will not be prepared for this date. Across Canada, police departments are scrambling to train and certify their officers as drug recognition experts so that they can identify and charge those who are impaired. If we at this time can reflect about the real-life consequences that will happen once marijuana is legalized for recreational purposes, I think that all partisanship aside, it would be inappropriate to rush ahead until at least the training and equipment are acquired by our law enforcement agencies. It is truly astounding that regardless of how many times people are reminded and taught about the dangers of driving while impaired, the numbers are not coming down as quickly as we would like. According to MAD Canada, over 1,000 Canadians a year are dying in impairment-related crashes. While there have been great strides in bringing this number down, there is still much more to do. We must never forget that only 50 years ago, impaired driving was in many instances a tolerated behavior. Many of us have heard stories where if you were caught behind the wheel, sometimes the police officer would maybe even let you drive home while he followed just to make sure that you got there. Now in Canada, our drunk driving laws are some of the most heavily litigated in our judicial system, and massive amounts of resources are being applied to keep our roadways safe. I know that bars, pubs, and restaurants are doing all their own part, or all doing their own part, in serving responsibly. I know that organizations are working diligently around the clock to lobby for stricter laws and new ways to deter reckless behavior. And the most powerful antidote to fix this problem is for friends and loved ones to step up to the plate and ensure that nobody operates a motor vehicle while impaired. Education and awareness must continue. I know there are many members in this House who have worked diligently on Bill C-46. I also know that police and RCMP officers are doing everything in their power to enforce the law and keep dangerous drivers from hurting others. No person or family deserves to go through what the member from St. Leonard, St. Michel has gone through. I too know firsthand what it means to be directly impacted by an impaired driver. One incident is too many. We should never tolerate, under any circumstance, that driving while impaired is socially acceptable. With that, I will finish my remarks and once again thank my honourable colleague for all of his work throughout the years and for bringing this debate to the floor of the House of Commons. Thank you, Madam Speaker.